Today, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, the young man believed to have assassinated Charlie Kirk, who's facing the death penalty in Utah, by the way, made a virtual court appearance. And the judge ruled that the transcript and audio recording from a closed-door hearing that was held back in October will be released to the public with some limited redactions, citing the public's right to access. We did learn that Robinson, the defendant, will be allowed to wear his regular clothes instead of prison garb. Why is this important? We'll discuss that. But we are still waiting the judge's ruling on whether he'll allow cameras in the courtroom. I personally think that would be a great idea. The legal question is, who is that actually going to benefit, the cameras, the prosecutors or the defense? And by the way, Robinson's defense team hasn't entered a plea. So will they pursue some kind of insanity defense, even though, by the way, Utah doesn't allow a traditional insanity defense? We're going to talk about that. So let me bring in renowned trial lawyer Mark Geragos and the chief patient officer for the Wellness Center, Dr. Drew Pinsky. I'm so happy to have you both here. Mark, let me start with you. Utah doesn't have a traditional insanity defense, right? So what does that mean? That means that someone could be found not guilty by reason of insanity or guilty but mentally ill. What are we talking about?
Well, it's much more restrictive than we usually think of for insanity. And so you have a kind of what I like to call a very small pathway to navigate if you're the defense. This may be one of the few cases in Utah that I can think of recently where that might work based on what is being reported. But we're just looking at this from the outside and hearing whatever is being released. We don't know what the professionals have done so far, how much they've analyzed, what the mental health history is here, things of that nature. When when you bring Drew into the conversation, he's going to have, I'm sure, a lot to talk about on this. But it appears to me, at least, that this young man and the defense team has got their work cut out for them based on a lot of the things that have been reported so far.
So let's talk about that, Dr. Drew. I mean, if you take all this evidence, it feels quite overwhelming against him that he's the shooter. But if you look at the Discord messages and the text messages, you're getting kind of an insight into it. What are your thoughts on potential mental health defense?
There's a lot more to be revealed yet. I mean, you get a sense of the grandiosity, and it's smacks of a psychotic process. But as Mark is pointing out, just being what I would call insane as a clinician, or what as an average person in terms of talking to them would recognize as someone who's not in reality, doesn't necessarily rise to the level of legal insanity, because there's clearly a consciousness of wrongdoing. He's hiding the weapon. He's taken a position nobody can see him. He's hidden out for a while afterwards. He also apparently had some suicidality for a while. So there's a lot more to be revealed about this case. But Mark, I'm wondering if they're doing this as sort of a negotiation ploy, because I don't see how it rises to the level of an legal insanity defense.
Dr. Drew, I mean, that was a great question. Mark, what do you think?
Well, that's why I know and love Drew, because he does get it.
I also, by the way, Mark, I entertained both of our wives until about 10 minutes ago. I did not know we were going to be together. Had I known that, somebody would have mentioned that to me. But
Mark, does Dr. Drew have a point that it's a negotiating tactic?
Well, look, the cynic in me says, look, you're never going to push that aside. I mean, this reminds me in a lot of ways, like I say, from the outside looking in, as kind of the struggle that those who were defending the Unabomber had back in the day. And there was a constant struggle because they wanted to push for a mental health defense. He did not want a mental health defense. I think this thing is eerily reminiscent to that kind of a struggle that you will have as a defense lawyer. And that is always the problem that you've got. If somebody is mired in this psychological condition, telling them that they are not, competent, telling them that they have a disease, they don't quite understand that. Drew can tell you that it's an enormous lift to try to communicate with somebody and to make them realize that. They don't realize that.
And this is something missing generally in the conversation in this country, both because of all the people on the street and in the legal system, which is lack of insight is a feature of these brain diseases. Serious mental illness, addiction, blocks insight. It actually has a name. It's called anosognosia. It's a biological block, so people cannot see what is happening to them as a result of the brain condition.
And I want to focus on that because we're going to also talk about Nick Reiner in a second. Mark, just sticking with Tyler Robinson for a second. Look, if you talk about, by the way, this issue of cameras in the courtroom, look, I cover trials all the time. I'm one for transparency. I think it's value added. But cameras in the courtroom can affect a trial. In your opinion, when you're looking at a case like this, would it benefit the prosecution over the defense, vice versa? And by the way, he's also apparently going to be allowed to wear civilian clothes, so the jury's perception of him will be entirely different. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, look, I have evolved over the years. I mean, 25 years ago, I was adamantly against cameras in the courtroom. I have learned since then that that does not help. And both with clients who were acquitted and clients who were convicted in high-profile cases. In the event of an acquittal, when there is no camera in the courtroom, then people think you got off. They don't realize that the prosecution case imploded. In the case where they were convicted, people assume the worst because they're getting the information filtered through a lens of somebody who might not even be in the courtroom but is reading kinds of somebody else's transcription. That I don't think is healthy either. When there's this kind of interest in a case, when there's this kind of public curiosity, I think there ought to be cameras in the courtroom.
Now, Dr. Drew, I want to save some time so you could talk about taking the wives out to dinner. But before we get to that, I do want.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I do want to focus on Nick Reiner for a second because there is an insanity defense in California. Traditional insanity defense. If somebody has a mental disease or defect, did they not appreciate the wrongfulness of their conduct?
Yes.
Did they not understand? I find this one an interesting issue because, yes, he had schizophrenia, right? That's what's being documented. There was an issue of his medication. But I don't know. I mean, allegedly getting the hotel room, getting into allegedly a fight the night before, and then I see it's really him on camera in that surveillance footage. It's so eerily calm that it does make me wonder, are you dealing with an insanity case?
Well, I guess that would buttress that case a bit, but that is the thing about if indeed he has schizophrenia, which again, when people are doing lots of drugs, people get various labels of various kinds of serious mental illness that seem to fade away when you just get them off the drugs. So if indeed he was diagnosed during the sort of usual window of 18 to 22, and if he had chronic psychosis, yes, people with schizophrenia can be really bizarre in terms of how they behave and very grandiose at the same time. And so, yeah, all of that is a suggestion of defense, but we're back to the same issue. Did he know he was doing something wrong? I'm suspicious that he was also doing drugs that night, and when people get violent like that, it's often methamphetamine, and they often don't even remember what happened.
Well, Mark, you and I both know that if someone voluntarily ingests drugs, that kind of defeats the idea of, an insanity defense. But your take on mental health and insanity defense, whether or not a form of not guilty for Nick Reiner, I know it's in the early stages, or at least mitigating it, and maybe saying it's not first-degree murder, maybe it's second-degree murder, maybe he didn't have intent to kill, something of that nature?
Well, look, I think this is, and I haven't discussed this with Alan, who's his lawyer, but my guess is that part of the reason they put it over for almost 3 weeks was to get to Drew's point, to get to the point where you faded away from the drug use. Because until you fade away from the drug use, and clearly he's in the Twin Towers mental health unit, that's why he was wearing that kind of blue bedspread. That's symbolic of or indicative that you're housed in the mental health unit. And until you get that kind of distance, you can't tell whether chicken or the egg.
Yep,
and so that's one reason. And then second of all, I still think in California, we've got this unique situation, it's not totally unique, of competency. Is Nick Reiner competent to stand trial at this point? Does he have any recognition of what he did, where he is, or why he's there? And until, as Drew says, you've always got that kind of, I hate to say sweet spot, window of 18 to 22 when schizophrenia rears its head. I don't know, and I don't have any insight into whether or not he was diagnosed then or he was showing the signs then, but I will tell you, you don't know the impossibility of dealing with somebody when they're at 100%. This far gone. It is just... It's unbelievable how difficult it is for a loved one to deal with that.
100%. I'll tell you what.
You get sucked into it.
No, this is an important conversation. It's actually a conversation I want to continue. You both are great. I have my show starting next month, 11 o'clock.
We'll be there.
You, your wives, you're all coming on. We'll do a special segment.
I know a great place for dinner up the street here,
As long as Drew is picking up the tab. Yes, as long as Drew's picking up the tab.
I'm glad I'm not involved in that. All right, Dr. Drew Pinsky, Mark Geragos, thank you both so much.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.